checking something off the bucket list time. I finally got one of these things after many years of almost getting them, chickening out because of the cost, or ordering one from somebody who never shipped it, all sorts of issues. And what this is a Curta. This was the pocket calculator, if you will, of choice up until the early electronic handheld calculators came out in the 70s. These were invented in Germany by an Austrian inventor who was half Catholic, half Jewish, and although he started out under Nazi occupation, making odds and ends in his factory for the German war machine, he was eventually thrown into Buchenwald concentration camp, but allowed to have a fairly privileged life there because of his skill. And he worked in a shop of some sort there that did various technical things, and he revealed that he had in his head a design for a really small 4-function pocket calculator. At that time, if you had a mechanical calculator, it was a great big desk thing, you couldn't carry it around. And they were intrigued and said, well, we'll give you leeway to work on that and complete the design, and maybe we'll use it if it's successful. So he spent the rest of his time at Buchenwald working on the engineering drawings, but nothing was built during the war. And after the war, he looked around for financial backing to manufacture the thing that he designed during the war, and finally found it in Liechtenstein, the country of Liechtenstein, and set up a company called Cantina AG Mauren, and produced these things. Actually, quite a lot of them were made, and the company kept doing it up until the demand dropped off with the advent of the early electronic calculators that could also do 4-function math for much less money. These were in the 50s and 60s over $100, which was over $1,000 today, so they were expensive. On the other hand, the earliest 4-function calculators cost maybe $90, which would be, $800 or some odd dollars today. Of course, the price rapidly dropped. I don't think these ever got less expensive. Anyway, this particular artifact came from somebody, I'm pretty sure they were from the Ames, or the NASA Ames facility in Mountain View, California. So I'm guessing that it was the personal possession of somebody over there, and bought it from them. It's in excellent shape. The outer case has got a lot of wear and tear, just the anodizing rubbing off from use, but the actual Curta calculator is pretty much unblemished. Tiny marks of wear and tear here and there, but not too bad. On the bottom it says System Curta Herzstark. Kurt Herzstark was the Austrian engineer who designed this and ran the company that made them. Made in Liechtenstein. There's the logo by Cantina AG Mauren, and it's a Type 1. They made Type 1 and Type 2. The Type 2 was a little bigger and had more digits. You could work on bigger numbers, and there's a serial number there. The serial numbers, by use of a table and a calculation, can be reversed to provide the year and month of manufacture. And this was made very early in August of 1961. So it's a fairly late example. And the calculation shows that it was probably one of the first ones made in August of that year. So I'm not going to do a complete documentary on the Curta here, just showing off my new baby here. But I will give a quick overview. First off, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sliders, and this is where values are input into the calculator, and it's done by sliding them up and down. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to show this very well with the lighting I have. So you can see this little number that's here. As I move the slider down, it changes to a 1, to a 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 9. And the next slider around, similarly. So you put in your numbers that way. And you can do it with one hand. You could just dial them in with your thumb, and all the numbers appear in the little readouts around here. And then right above those, along the top, there's a bunch of little readouts around the top. Each of those can go from 0 to 9. And there's an internal register in this. And turning the crank on the top, one clockwise rotation, will take whatever is in these input registers and move it up into the, you almost want to call it the accumulator of the calculator. This is where values are accumulated and results indicated. So once something is up here, you can move the sliders to a different position, turn the crank again, and it'll add whatever's on the sliders to whatever's in this accumulated value. So you can do very simple addition by doing that. And if you want to do subtraction, you first put the one number into here, set up the second number, and then you lift the crank up. You can kind of see that here. The crank is down, now the crank is up. When it's up, that red band appears. So that means it's going to do subtraction. Then you turn the crank one revolution, and it subtracts the new number from the previous number that was entered, and the result will show up here. Every time you turn the crank to do an operation, this other set of numbers on the top, and they're designated by the white or silver outline, this is a rotation counter. And so every time you turn the crank around, this counts up like an odometer. That's not so useful for simple addition and subtraction, but if you're doing multiplication and division, multiplication can be done by just successive addition, of course. You could just put in a number and then turn the crank around. For example, if you wanted to have 123 times 4, you would enter 123 and then turn the crank around 4 times, and you'd see that the number 4 would appear in the rotation counter, and then the answer would be on the top. It would have just taken 123 and added it to itself 4 times, and you get the answer. Division is done by, well, there's several ways to do division. You can do long division. It's almost an exact analog to the way you would do long division on paper, but using the for functionality, or the same methodology that you would use in your head and on paper for long division, but doing it with the addition and subtraction capabilities of the Curta. There's other techniques as well that are more sophisticated. And when you're done with the calculation, when you clear everything out, this whole collar on the top lifts up like that. And when you lift it up, you can do that with one hand. And then there's this little ring on the top. Snap it into position, and you turn the ring one time around, and it zeroes everything back out. It zeroes out the rotation counter, it zeroes out the accumulator register, and so that's what you do. The reason this little clearing ring folds out of the way is so that it doesn't get broken off during handling, because it does, unlike anything else, it sticks out from the side of the calculator, and it's kind of small and potentially fragile. You know, it's made out of steel or something, I don't know what. It's pretty strong, but it can still be broken off, and some of these show up online with these broken off. And then when you want to actually store it, you just snap it back into this folded position, and it'll go back inside of its case that way. The case has a pad on the bottom. You can probably kind of see it in there. It's like a foam pad. So that pads the bottom of it when it's in the case. And then the top, which just turns on with a screwing motion. On the inside of it, it has a protuberance. Let's see if I can get my hand in the right place to show it. There you can see a protuberance that sticks down from the lid, and it has a pad on it. And then that pad rests on top of the crank, so the calculator is being suspended in there like this. Another characteristic of this is this top ring. Again, you can probably see it here. There's an arrow here, and on the bottom of this ring, which again can be lifted, it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. It goes up to 11. Okay, another Spinal Tap reference. So those are decimal positions. So for example, if you wanted to do a multiplication, and you didn't want to turn the crank so many times, let's say you wanted to multiply 235 by 13, you could enter the one value, like 13, into here, and then turn the crank. This would be essentially the unit's position when it's pointing at 1. You'd turn the crank until the turns register indicates, what I say, 235. You'd turn it around 5 times until it shows 5 times. Then you would lift the ring and turn it to the 2 positions. Now you're dealing with the second decimal point to the left. In other words, you're going from the units to the tens, and you keep the 13 here, and you had 235, I think was the number. I keep forgetting the number I said. Then you would turn the crank 3 times for that, raise this, move it to the 3rd position, and then crank it around 2 more times, and your answer would appear here. So that would be a lot faster than cranking it around 235 times. Or conversely, entering 235 here, it might be faster just to turn the crank 13 times until the turns register shows you 13 than to go through that process of cranking it around and moving this. So you have to kind of decide which technique you want to use. Division, again, is the most complicated thing. Obviously, successive subtraction is the simplest, and if you're not dealing with really big numbers, that's probably the way you do it. But if you are going to be dealing with larger or more complex situations, then you use the more advanced techniques, which I won't go into here. But you can also do pretty much any type of calculation on here in the same way, more or less, you would do it if you had a 4-function electronic calculator. and you would resort to logarithmic tables. You'd, have to enter the value of pi manually because there wouldn't be a key for it like modern calculators have. You'd use tables for exponents and things like that. So you'd use a combination of tables and trickier arithmetic techniques that get it all down to the point where it can be done with a 4-function calculator. The Curta was used widely by scientists and engineers and technical people, again, until it became possible to have an electronic pocket calculator. And they were also used by airplane pilots before, again, electronic tools that would allow them to do rapid, accurate calculations in the cockpit, or even before they take off. They were used by race car drivers and crews to do various calculations. And even today, rally driving, just out of tradition, a lot of people still use these just because it's the old school way of doing things. It has a certain charm to it. But anyway, I didn't want to make this a tutorial on the Curta. There's also a switch here, and what that does is you can make the crank operation work in inverse by moving that switch. So again, I won't go into it, but it changes the way the complex mechanism in here operates when you turn the crank around in one direction. The crank always turns clockwise, but you can make it effectively work like it's going backwards by moving that slide switch down on the side there. So again, this has got 8 input digits. I think the Curta Type II goes up to 11 input digits, and of course it has a correspondingly larger number of positions on the top. It's a little larger in diameter. One more thing I want to just cover. You may notice these little silver nubs that stick out here. Those are your decimal points. It actually rides in a track that's machined into the body, and there's a similar one around the top. So depending what type of math you're doing, you might want to remember where your decimal points are at. If you're working with fractions or decimal fractions, some of the numbers on the low end are going to represent decimal fractions. So 0.1, 0.01, the different decimal orders of magnitude. And then everything to the left of that would be, units, tens, hundreds, and so on. So depending what you're doing, you want to move these little decimal point references. And all you do is they actually have a tiny little spring in there, and you push them down, and then that frees them up in the track, and they can be slid around like this. I slid it over to the right of the ones position. Or I could move it over like that and have it in that position, and so on. And you actually have provision for additional points like a comma to remember where you're at in numbers with a lot of digits to them. Or you can just slide them way over to the side and stow them, kind of out of the way. And the same thing again on the top. There are at least 4 of these things, 5 on the top. So you can use them on the rotation counter. You can use them on the output register or accumulator. There are over 600 precision machined parts in a Curta calculator, a Curta Type I, even more on the Type II. You should really look it up if you're interested in this kind of thing. There's a lot of videos online showing animations of these working and showing all the parts and how they go together and everything. It's just a really cool piece of history and something of an engineering marvel.